The day my grandmother, Genevieve Dubois, died, I inherited two things: her staggering fortune and her razor-sharp wisdom. But here's the kicker. No one in my own family knew. They saw me, Isabel Moreau, as the perpetually struggling bookstore employee in Boston, easily dismissed and perpetually disappointing. They had no clue I was suddenly worth over $50 million, controlling diversified investments, real estate across 3 continents, and key shares in major corporations Genevieve had built quietly, meticulously, from absolutely nothing. Her final letter contained the words that would become my mantra, a chillingly accurate observation. People show their truest selves only when they think you have nothing. And, oh, how true that would prove. At 23, holding documents that felt heavier than gold, I made a choice. This inheritance, this power, would remain my secret. Why? Because my family, my social climbing mother Vivian, my image-obsessed father Bernard, my recklessly spoiled brother Julian, worshipped only at the altar of appearances. They dismissed Genevieve as frustratingly frugal, blind to the empire she commanded. They certainly wouldn't understand me now. How would I use this hidden leverage as their carefully constructed world began to crumble under the weight of their own choices? Stick around and watch this play out. You won't want to miss how this quiet heiress turns the tables. Like and follow if you're ready for the ride. My family existed in a self-constructed bubble of Boston Brahmin aspiration, completely oblivious to the Dubois Holdings empire I now secretly commanded. To them, I was just Isabel, the disappointing daughter working a dead-end job. Isabel, darling. My mother Vivian's voice, sharp as ever, would cut through my thoughts, usually followed by a critique of my simple attire or lack of advantageous connections. She who had spent 2 decades trying to mold me into her vision of perfection and failing miserably, lived in constant fear of what the right people thought. Their opinions mattered more than oxygen. My father, Bernard, echoed her sentiments, his hopes pinned entirely on my younger brother, Julian, the golden child. At 20, Julian had never worked a real day, coasting from one failed, parent-funded startup to the next, collecting luxury trinkets along the way. They saw his recklessness as potential, my pragmatism as failure. And grandmother Genevieve? To them, she was just the frustratingly frugal matriarch who refused to bankroll their lavish lifestyle, never grasping she was one of the wealthiest women in the city. That ignorance was her shield, and now it was mine. So, I continued playing my part, Isabel Moreau, the quiet employee shelving books in a quaint neighborhood shop, a shop, along with the building and several others on the block, that I actually owned through Dubois Holdings. They saw a struggle. I saw strategic positioning. Their blindness was my greatest asset. The carefully constructed facade of the Laurent family's finances began to show visible stress fractures, impossible even for them to completely ignore. It started subtly. The household staff was suddenly temporarily reduced. Their prestigious country club membership mysteriously became inactive, and Vivian abruptly discovered a deep passion for vintage couture, conveniently sourced from the back of her own closet. Yet, amid these tightening belts, one aspect remained glaringly unchanged: Julian's extravagant lifestyle. Even as the family finances visibly crumbled, my parents continued to funnel money into his every whim, treating his failed ventures as mere stepping stones. His demands never ceased, and their funding somehow never stopped. I watched it all, not with surprise but with a chilling clarity. I'd seen the desperation flickering behind their practiced smiles at social events, the slight tremble in my father's hand as he signed checks he couldn't afford, the tight lines around Vivian's eyes when conversations drifted towards lavish vacations they could no longer take. The grand Boston mansion they were so proud of, the one they'd remortgaged 3 times to maintain appearances, was slowly slipping through their fingers like sand. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly conceive, was that I wasn't just watching, I was acting. Guided by Genevieve's foresight and facilitated by the resources of Dubois Holdings, I had begun, quietly, meticulously, buying up their debt. Through a network of anonymous shell companies, every desperate loan, every refinanced mortgage note, every maxed-out credit card fell under my control. They thought they were juggling creditors. In reality, they were becoming solely indebted to me. I owned their precarious financial lives, waiting for the inevitable collapse they refused to see coming. The inevitable tipping point arrived not with a dramatic crash, but with a sterile notification from my assistant, Sarah. I wasn't in the cramped back room of the bookstore, where my family pictured me counting pennies. I was in my actual office, the CEO suite on the 47th floor of Boston's most prestigious downtown tower, overlooking the city Genevieve had helped build. "Ms. Moreau." Sarah's voice came through the intercom, calm and professional. Julien Laurent just made another significant withdrawal from his parents' emergency fund. I pulled up the secure banking records on my main screen, the numbers confirming Sarah's report. There it was, $175,000 transferred directly to a high-end luxury car dealership, likely for the flashy new Maserati he'd undoubtedly soon be flaunting. Money they absolutely, unequivocally did not possess. "How much is left, Sarah?" I asked, though the integrated dashboard already displayed the grim answer. "Less than $50,000, Ms. Moreau, and their mortgage payment is due next week." I leaned back in my executive chair, the supple leather cool against my back, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape. The intricate web I'd patiently woven over the past few years, acquiring every piece of their outstanding debt, had finally drawn tight. Years of enabling Julien, of prioritizing appearances over solvency, had led them precisely here. This latest act of reckless extravagance wasn't just foolish. It was the final, definitive signal. The time for quiet observation was over. The moment for consequences had arrived. Taking a steadying breath, I leaned towards the intercom. "Sarah," I instructed, my voice even, betraying none of the complex emotions swirling beneath the surface. "Schedule the foreclosure notices for the Laurent property. It's time." Just as I anticipated, the very next morning, the bell above the bookstore door chimed violently as my mother burst in. Vivian looked frantic, her usual immaculate composure replaced by a raw panic that even her genuine, albeit last season, designer handbag couldn't conceal. "Isabel!" Her voice was shrill, tight with fear. "Something terrible has happened. The bank! They called this morning. They're threatening. They're going to foreclose on the house." I looked up from the ledger I was pretending to diligently review, schooling my features into mild surprise. "What? Foreclose? How is that possible?" Inside, I felt a cold sort of vindication mixed with a flicker of something almost like pity. "Your father. There have been some business setbacks. Just temporary," she stammered, reaching across the counter, her manicured fingers gripping my hand with surprising force. "Darling, we just need a little help. How much do you have saved? Anything?" It was almost comical. After years spent mocking my little bookstore job, she was now eyeing my supposed savings like a starving woman eyeing bread. "Mom, I make maybe $35,000 a year," I lied smoothly, keeping my voice level. "After rent and bills here in Boston, I barely save anything." Her face fell instantly. "But surely you must have something, an emergency fund." I paused, letting the silence hang. "I have about $3,000 saved," I offered, the lie tasting bitter. "We need it," she declared immediately, relief flooding her features. "Just until your father's deals come through. Julian has some very promising ventures in the works, you know." I leaned back slightly, studying her desperate face. "Mom, that $3,000 is literally everything I have. What about Julian's new Maserati? Couldn't he sell that?" "Don't be ridiculous!" Vivian snapped, her desperation instantly curdling into indignation. "He needs to maintain appearances. How else will he attract the right kind of investors?" "And my appearance doesn't matter?" I asked quietly. "That's different." She waved her hand dismissively. "You're just not in those circles." Anger finally replaced desperation in her eyes. "How can you be so selfish, Isabel, after everything we've done for you?" The question hung in the air. "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, genuinely curious to see if she could name one significant thing beyond basic provision. Confusion flickered across her face as she struggled. We gave you a good home, an education. The education I paid for with student loans. The ones you refused to co-sign because you were funding Julian's third startup. That's not fair. Julian has vision," she protested weakly. "Get out." My voice was quiet but firm. "Excuse me." "Get out of my store, Mom, and don't ask me for money again." She left in a flurry of slammed doors and muttered threats. Later that evening, my father called, his smooth business negotiation voice in full effect. "Isabel, your mother tells me you were quite unhelpful today. We need to discuss this situation like adults. This family has a reputation." He sighed heavily when I refused again. "Let's be realistic, Isabel. You work in a bookstore. Your future is... well, it's set, isn't it? Julian has real potential." "Then you're no daughter of mine," he bit out before the line went dead. Alone in my luxurious office, overlooking the glittering Boston lights, I almost smiled. The trap was sprung. The bankruptcy hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a crisp October morning. I arrived early, parking my unassuming sedan down the street and watching from the tinted windows as my family pulled up in Julian's Maserati, apparently the only vehicle they had left that conveyed the right, delusional image. Vivian's designer outfit was impeccable, though clearly from a previous season. Bernard's suit looked weary, mirroring the strain on his face. Even Julian's trademark smirk seemed forced, brittle. They hadn't seen me yet, wouldn't even think to look for me here. As far as they knew, their wayward daughter was miles away, diligently counting pennies at her little bookstore job. I waited until they entered the Boston courthouse before following, my briefcase containing the documents that would irrevocably alter their reality. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with hushed anticipation. A significant portion of the city's elite had turned out, drawn by the morbid curiosity of witnessing the spectacular fall of the once prominent Laurent family. My parents sat rigidly in the front row, heads held high in a defiant display of denial, while Julian slouched beside them, distractedly tapping on his phone. "All rise!" The bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs as Judge Marion Wheeler entered, a woman known for her sharp intellect and intolerance for self-inflicted financial wounds. She settled behind the bench, adjusting her glasses. Case number 2847, Laurent family bankruptcy petition, she announced, her gaze sweeping over the submitted papers. I see the primary creditor's representative is present. This was my cue. I stood up from my seat in the back, smoothing the lines of my Chanel suit, a label my family certainly wouldn't recognize on me. Yes, Your Honor, I stated clearly, my voice carrying easily in the suddenly silent room. Isabelle Moreau, representing Dubois Holdings. The reaction was immediate and electric. Vivienne whirled around, her carefully maintained mask finally cracking, her face paling beneath the makeup. Bernard stared, dumbfounded, while Julian actually dropped his phone with a clatter. Isabelle, Vivienne whispered, disbelief etched onto her features. I walked deliberately to the front, placing my briefcase on the creditor's table. Good morning, Mother, Father, Julian. What is the meaning of this? Bernard demanded, starting to rise before his lawyer quickly pulled him back down. Judge Wheeler banged her gavel sharply. Mr. Laurent, maintain order. Ms. Moreau, please proceed. Your Honor, I began, addressing the judge but acutely aware of my family's stunned gazes. Dubois Holdings currently holds all outstanding debts of the Laurent family, including the primary mortgage on their Boston residence, personal loans, and all credit accounts. The total sum is approximately $12.7 million. That's impossible, Julian blurted out. Isabelle works in a bookstore. I allowed myself a small, controlled smile. Actually, I own the bookstore, Julian, and the building it's in, plus most of the block. I am the CEO of Dubois Holdings. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. However, I continued, withdrawing a prepared document, I am not here to demand immediate liquidation. I have a proposal. My proposal left them cornered. Accept the harsh terms or face utter annihilation. They had no real choice. After frantic whispers with their lawyer, my father reluctantly agreed. The rest was a whirlwind of signatures, my parents radiating shame and anger, studiously avoiding my eyes. Julian bolted the first chance he got, probably trying to salvage funds already locked down by Dubois Holdings. As I walked out of the Boston courthouse, Vivienne caught up to me, her voice small, fragile. Why, Isabelle? Why let it get this bad? I faced her directly. Because you needed to understand, Mother. True value isn't in bank accounts or designer labels, it's character. I wanted you to feel what it's like to be judged solely on what others think you lack. Months later, reports show grudging compliance. The budget, the counseling, the modest house in Brookline. Julian even has a real job, entry-level grunt work. Genevieve's words echo constantly. People show their truest selves only when they think you have nothing. This story isn't just revenge. It's a brutal lesson in a world obsessed with appearances, drowning in social media pressure and materialism. It forces us to ask what truly matters. But was I entirely right? Is tough love the only answer? Can people like the Lawrence truly change? What would you have done with that power? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Share your perspective, and don't forget to follow for more stories that challenge and provoke.